This is kind of going back to the last deputation where we're talking about robbing Paul to pay Peter, either or, is that we are going to be giving $1,000, I believe it is, to the Port Dover Lionesses to subsidize rental fees that they have paid the county. That makes, I'm not faulting the whole process here, as again, on a whole systemic use, that makes absolutely no sense to me whatsoever, that we're using our grant money to pay a service club where we've already charged them rates that I think most of council is probably saying we shouldn't even be charging them anyway. So I know there isn't anything you can do about that. That's just a point to be made. So.
They went through the proper process to get that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that shouldn't, we're not granting. Why would we be granting? We're taking money that we have as a county, and we're then taking it from that pot. I will now move over to
Councillor Taylor.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Mr. Hoskins. Isn't normal for all of the funds not to be used initially? There's usually the unallocated fund at the end of these processes?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Taylor. Normally it's kind of staff philosophy to allow some flexibility within the budget for council to make decisions down the road. So we try to leave a little bit of a perhaps a slush fund, as Councillor Rabbits mentioned. So,
thank you.
Next, Mayor Chop.
Maybe I'm just missing the number. How much was allocated last year? Do you know? Or sorry, through the chair.
yes, Madam Mayor, on page 50, where it says attachment C, 2018 municipal grant summary. So last year, $52,000 was recommended last year.
Yeah, Mr. Johnson would like to say something.
All right, there we go. Sorry, just to clarify that, that is what was presented last year. However, during the year 2018, there was 4 grants offered to 4 different organizations totaling $5,100. So actually the amount left over, which is written in the finance comments, there's $4,900 that was not spent last year. If you want to know the names of those 4 groups, I could let you know, but.
So, but just to clarify, so last year was 52 less the 4,900, and this year we're 60,500.
Last year, what was spent was 57,100, with 4,900 remaining to bring it up to the 62.
Okay. So is this traditional? I'm just surprised that we wouldn't go through our budget first, our levy budget, and determine how much we were able to allocate to this and then approve the grants. I find it a little bit strange to do it ahead of time.
Through the chair to Mayor Chop, I'm not sure when this report was presented last year. However, what we've done traditionally is we have an allocation in our operating budget, and then the application process occurs, and then as Clark mentions, there's a little bit of room there for any decisions to be made throughout the year.
Okay. Through the chair. So, and this is, just to confirm, this is an exhaustive list. So there's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that didn't receive what they asked.
Through the chair, yes. For the 2019 grant request, yes, you're right. There's
Okay.
only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that did not receive a recommended amount.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Further questions to Director of Tourism and Economic Development? I don't see any. Can I have a mover and a seconder to accept the presentation? Councillor Rabbits and Councillor Taylor, those in favor? That's carried. I'm not sure I had to do that, right? I didn't. Okay. I'm still learning too. Yeah. Now, in our package, in the report, we do have a recommendation that's printed on page 47 of the agenda package. And I need a mover and a seconder for that, if you so wish. Councillor Rabbits moves. Councillor Taylor seconds. following recommendation, the staff report DCS 19-01, 2019 municipal grants be received as information, that Norfolk County Council approve grant allocations for the 2019 budget as outlined within Schedule A of the report, and that council invite grant recipients to a future meeting of council for presentation of initial checks of 90% of the grant amounts. And further, that the Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board recommends that Norfolk County Council amend policy MC-05, county grant policy, and the grant application form to require applicants to submit an accounting of any previous grant disbursements to be eligible for further consideration. Any further discussion? Call the vote. Those in favor of this recommendation as printed on page 47. Hands up, nice. Those opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Our next report is no stranger to this council chambers. It's with respect to backyard hens. We have Mr. Matt Vaughn speaking to it. We got a presentation on the,
Yes,
Thanks.
it's up there. Okay. Ready
Go
to go?
ahead.
Thanks very much. The report that's before you was directed by council at a previous meeting in December, and the direction was that staff be directed to bring forward to the first council meeting in January proposed regulations for Norfolk County in respect of allowing backyard chickens, including some provisions and criteria for that, as well as preparing a report comparing how these proposed regulations compare with other municipalities. So the report in front of you does that. It looks at various options, explains some of the background with having chickens, and at the end of the report provides a recommendation from staff in regards to the keeping of chickens. So there are some advantages and disadvantages of having backyard chickens. The list is quite long here. I won't go into it in great detail. But I guess the main point behind the slide before you is really just to show that list is, it's fairly even between advantages and disadvantages. And I think council needs to be cognizant of there being both obstacles, liabilities, as well as those advantages. When staff looked at other municipalities in Ontario, just to see how they dealt with backyard hens, I'll call them, we looked at municipalities across all of Ontario. We looked at 18 municipalities in total, and what we saw was that a lot of municipalities who chose to regulate backyard hens did so either using the Planning Act or they did that using the Municipal Act. And there are obvious advantages to using either or both. And that is something that council can consider in developing a policy for backyard chickens. This is the list of municipalities that staff looked at. And some of them were, I know it's a great picture, some of them did participate in having backyard chickens while some didn't. Those that did specify certain things, like, for instance, no roosters, limiting the number of hens, having a mechanism to inform neighbors, limited to the rear yard. The rear yard needed to be enclosed or fenced. Minimum lot size, minimum setback for the coop, no home slaughter, no egg sales, required licenses, cleanliness, manure storage, and banding of hens. So planning staff have looked at all the various policies, and there are three options that council could choose to go with, or other options if we could go with as well. Option one is do nothing. So currently backyard hens are not permitted in the county and they're limited to the agricultural zone. So option one is just keeping things as is. Option two would be to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw to permit backyard hens in hamlet areas and create backyard hens bylaw under the Municipal Act. And the idea behind that would be to register and permit owners for backyard hens. Option 3 gets a little bit more complicated, but this is the option where we put in specific guidelines for if we're going to have hens, here's what staff are recommending to do. So the idea here is to amend the Norfolk County zoning bylaw to permit backyard hens in both the urban, residential, and hamlet areas. And then as well create a license system for them, similar to what the county does with dogs and cats and that sort of thing. If council does wish to proceed with that type of sort of situation or bylaw amendment, there is a fairly long list of criteria that we as staff could draft to put into a bylaw. Both a business, or not a business, but like an animal bylaw as well as a zoning bylaw. I'm not going to go through all of them. They're listed in your reports. And those things relate to both the care of the chickens as well as the location of the chickens and the licensing of the chickens. It also speaks to certain criteria about their coop so that they are being kept safe. One note that we received from our health and social services is that raising of chickens in backyards has been associated with the transmission of disease to human beings. Chickens are potential sources of salmonella, as well as other different types of viruses and parasites. They can also be infected with avian flu, which, as we've been warned in the past, can jump from species to species. And I think that's really the biggest risk of having chickens. Originally, I'll be honest, I didn't have too many concerns with chickens originally, but in my research and looking at what it could mean to have backyard chickens, the biggest thing that jumped out at me is really the prevention of disease. And by having chickens, we do increase that possibility, especially in our urban areas and the ag areas. It's a little bit different. There's a much larger buffer distance between where the birds live. But in the urban areas, we have the potential to put them very close together, and if there is a situation where there is a disease outbreak, it would be very hard to contain it, especially if we don't have some sort of a licensing system in place. So with all of that in mind, staff are recommending that the raising of hens should only occur in the agricultural area of Norfolk County, but I'm happy to hear questions and answer.
Through the chair, Matt, do you have chickens yourself?
Through the chair, right now I do not.
But you have had chickens.
In the past, yes, I've had chickens.
Organic chickens.
Well, as organic as I can make them, French
Okay.
fries and that sort of thing.
I'm just curious, through the chair, to Mr. Vaughn, who prepared the report?
Through the chair, the report was prepared between myself and our new planner, Neil.
And who assigned you to that report?
Well, Norfolk County Council requested that the report be prepared through the last meeting.
No, who assigned you to do that report? Do you get to choose which reports you do, or who assigned you to the report?
Through the chair, it would have been our Director of Planning.
So, Ms. Dusling. My concern right now, and to say that I'm a little bit upset would be an understatement, because I've known since the day after council had this meeting back in December, when we put the motion forward, that staff was going to come forward and was going to recommend against the chickens. And I just want to read the motion that was prepared at that meeting in December. The motion states that staff be directed to bring forward to the first council meeting in January proposed regulations for Norfolk County in respect to allowing backyard chickens, i.e., how many chickens, setback requirements, minimum acreage, size of coops, as well as a report comparing how these proposed regulations compare to other municipalities in Canada. I've gone back and I've pulled out the previous reports. I've pulled the report from July 4th, 2017. 5 pages were written by the planning department recommending against the chickens. I pulled out the report from September the 11th, 2018. 7 pages were prepared recommending against the chickens. This is going to be a long 4 years if the wishes of council are not respected. The direction from council was to prepare draft regulations, not to prepare an 8-page report with 4 pages dedicated to recommending against the chickens. If the draft bylaws were prepared and council wanted to recommend against it, for whatever reason, they had that choice. But when we are going into budgets and we are running a deficit and we don't have the money, I don't understand how staff would be allowed to prepare a report against the wishes of council. For me, this report, I would move to defer the report at this point until staff come back and ask to do the report that they were directed to do so by council.
Okay, Mayor Chop has expressed some concern about this report.
And has moved for a deferral.
She has moved deferral, and deferral takes precedence over the recommendation. So is there a seconder for deferral? I see Councillor Van Passen is prepared to second that. Are you prepared to speak to it also?
Well, I'm prepared to second it because, if you recall at the last meeting, I'm the only one that voted against chickens, but I respect process. Council made a decision, I lost. The requested staff for a very specific thing, and that's not what we got. So the mayor is absolutely correct. We want staff to bring back what we asked for last time. End of story.
Mr. Bond, do you have any comment with respect to the request or how you interpreted the request at the previous meeting?
Yes, through you, Chair, Mr. Chair. When I read the resolution, I thought the request was to bring back proposed regulations, which we've done through various options to council, including how to raise the chickens, keep the chickens, protect the county and its residents from owning chickens and from themselves, as well as preparing a report, which is in front of you, comparing how these regulations compare in other municipalities. In addition to that, the resolution had asked for this report to be brought back at the first meeting in January. Bringing a bylaw back requires public consultation. It's part of the Planning Act. We can't bring a bylaw before you without going through public consultation. It would not be lawful. So part of what's before you today is a collection of information, a collection of research that staff have put a lot of work into in order to present you with information so that council can make an informed and educated decision about what they're doing. So staff's happy to bring back a bylaw with after council has had an opportunity to review its options, and if you wish staff to bring back a very specific bylaw based on any of these options, or an option that you come up with yourselves, and staff is very happy to bring back that bylaw at a future meeting once we had an opportunity to circulate that bylaw to the public and go through the Planning Act process. But in order for us to have done that today, unfortunately, we wouldn't have had enough time.
So you're saying it would have to go through a public process, I think I heard you say.
Yeah, through the chair, the Planning Act requires a 20-day circulation period. How we do that right now is we circulate through the newspaper. That's one of our mechanisms in order to address certain bylaw amendments that affect all of the county. In order to put it into the newspaper, there's requirements we use the reformer. In order to put it into the reformer, that snippet or clip or whatever has to be in their hands at a certain amount of time, and then there's a bit of a process, internal process, reformer process, which we don't have control over, but ultimately it has to go through that 20-day appeal, public circulation period.
Okay, I see Mayor Chop has her hand up again, so I'll ask her to.
The ask was for proposed regulations. There is no legal requirement that a public consultation process would have had to happen before presentation at a CIC meeting, not ratified at council, of proposed regulations. You can't tell me each of these reports that were previously written in July, in September, I can pull them and I can read them and I can read the planning department's recommendation against the chickens. I didn't need to go and hear it a third time. The instruction from council, despite the fact that there may be a need for public consultation, could have happened after the presentation at the CIC with a comparison, so we could have said, hey, what they're doing in Toronto looks good. Hey, I like what they're doing in Guelph, that's great. You know, what they're doing in Kitchener, that's great. But instead, it's more pages of more opinion, and that is not what was asked for. And this one is not the first time this evening that this is about to happen. That was not the work that was requested by council. And when we already have agendas this thick, and we're staying here till 10 o'clock at night, it's going to be a long 4 years if when council issues a directive, staff comes back with something that was not what was requested of them.
Okay, I think we do have a motion on the floor. Don't we? Yeah. Moved by Mayor Chop and seconded by Councilor Van Passen that this item be deferred. I'm going to thank you, Matt. You can sit down, but I'm going to go to Ms. Disling to get her comments on this. Okay?
Thank you, through the chair. I guess planning staff are really just looking for some more direction from council. We're a little confused on if you want this to go through indeed the zoning bylaw process or the municipal act process. And some more details will help us bring more information forward to you.
Okay, I'm going to ask the clerk to read the motion.
Through the chair, the motion to defer I have as follows. Moved by Mayor Chop and seconded by Councillor Van Passen, that council defer staff report DCS 1916 and direct staff to bring back a report specifically addressing the direction outlined in resolution number 7 from the December 11th, 2018 Councilman Committee meeting.
Okay, everybody understand the recommendation? We call the vote. Those in favor? Those opposed? That is carried. Thank you. And now, folks, we're going to move to the closed session. We have a number of reports there. And I can't say whether or not there's going to be any recommendations coming out of that. Probably not. The deputy clerk says probably not. So we will now move into closed session. I need a mover and a seconder to move into closed session. That is Councillor Rabbits and Councillor Martin. Those in favor? That's carried. Thank you.